A patient with a post-traumatic tibial head deformity who has unfortunately been to many hospitals before and has been walking around in this situation for 17 years. It is an ongoing discussion whether such a case should be corrected or whether he now needs a prosthesis. The problem is, if you fit a prosthesis to a patient who is 55 years old, he will need a coupled prosthesis, which is definitely not an option, and a valgus of 17 degrees, even if it is bad laterally, has been walking around on this for 17 years. It will definitely get better and will prepare him with a correction ideal for his prosthesis later. This is a case for a correction. We can see that medially it's still quite good, and laterally he has a little bit of cartilage left. And even if he has a 4th degree arthrosis, he's better than before. He's almost free of complaints now that the correction is complete. What we then do is take supported images. I want to know how is the band laxity on the medial and lateral sides. How far can I open it laterally? You can see that it is good medially and can be opened up a bit laterally, which shows me that I have to be careful not to overcorrect it. At most in the 0 degree, because if it opens a little bit laterally by about 3 degrees, then it goes at most in 3 degrees of varus and he can cope with the situation. The question is again, how do we operate on him? An HTO, that is a lateral open wedge on the head of the tibia, is virtually obsolete. Post-traumatic scarring means he will surely get a peroneus paresis. We have to close it medially. Now the question is, do we do it medially on the tibial head? Because when we look at the analysis, he has a tibial plateau deformity. The distal femur is actually correct, but of course it also has an additional deformity in the area of the joint angle due to the arthrosis. And if I correct it here only on the tibia, then I get an overcorrection. I get a lateral oblique line. And these are very good cases for biplanar double-level osteotomies. In this case, a medial double-level closed wedge. And you see, after that, the joint is actually in a nice position again, and I can distribute the osteotomy over 2 corrections. This is good for the soft tissues, good for the axis, and good for the joint. When the experienced deformity correctors go more and more to the double-level osteotomies, even if at first glance it looks complicated or exaggerated, the joint is grateful. It is perfectly reconstructed and the soft tissues are grateful as well. I have planned such a correction here again. Especially interesting here is, how do I do the whole thing with the double-level osteotomy? At the beginning it might be a bit boring. I can try to go a bit further, because we have already learned here how to display these joint lines. We see that we have the joint lines, and if we now do the preoperative dimensioning, then we see, as I have already indicated, that this patient does not actually have a femoral deformity. And yet we correct it on the femur because it is at the lower edge of the norm range. In addition, there's the intra-articular deformity and the tibial deformity. So what do we do? I'm a pedant, so I'm going to put the planning values aside. I need to have that on the side. So let's plan the first osteotomy. We are now drawing it here on the tibial head and we'll be doing a closed wedge osteotomy. This means that the hinge point is placed on the lateral side. Then we tell the program to continue with the osteotomy. We indicate this to the program, put the whole plan next to it again, and the program just shows us, okay, that's a bit much correction up here, and the joint line is too oblique. So we tell the program, okay, we can now click on this image in mediCAD and then say, no, we don't want to do it like that. We take the planning aside without preview. Then we have to click on it. I will try to show this. Now we say we do not want too much, so we go back 6 degrees. We keep another 5 to 6 degrees of valgus, and then we say confirm without preview. Now comes this crucial step. You have to right-click on it. I can now start a second osteotomy here on the right, and I can do this as a supracondylar closed wedge osteotomy. Draw it in, do another closed wedge, and then we can see at first glance. Moore always said that what looks good is good, and it looks beautiful. We now have nice straight joint lines. We have our angles almost in range, both tibially and femorally. Well, we have 90.8, but we know 90 is normal. That means we are both femorally and tibially within the normal range, which is what we really want. And then we still have to insert our two plates. Honestly, I usually don't do that because I know how they lie. But I would recommend to the beginner to insert his osteotomy plate as well, to see if we can get there with the screws in the proximal tibia area. So femoral 5 degrees of correction, tibial 13 degrees of correction, and both as closed wedge. And here, of course, it makes sense to have a navigation system, or at least an alignment rod for a double-level closed wedge osteotomy to correct it intraoperatively, because you can be lucky and two errors cancel each other out. You can be unlucky and two errors add up. Then you can have an overcorrection or an undercorrection with two corrections. So all intraoperative methods, except the cable method, which is obsolete in my opinion, are useful to control the axis intraoperatively. We go further and you see that this is the planning and voila, this is the implementation. We can say we are satisfied, well healed, and the patient is doing very well. He will manage for a few more years with his correction after 17 years of walking with such a deformity before he has to get a prosthesis. And he will certainly have few more years until he can get a normal surface knee prosthesis without being partially coupled or even thinking about a coupled prosthesis. Now we have seen that these were complex corrections that are only planned in the frontal plane. Of course, there are much more complex ones that we have to rotate at the same time, or even we have to make sagittal corrections at the same time. Many thanks to Lichtenfels, that was exciting, and you showed very systematically how the steps are. Because often one sees results, but you also showed what do I have to consider, how do I have to prepare this, and then implement my steps bit by bit. Thank you very much for that. To Benedikt in Ulm, correction osteotomies, are you planning them digitally or still on paper? We also have mediCAD and plan the prosthesis and the corrective osteotomies with mediCAD as well. There we have a good tool. This is the routine for us, of course.